everyone, it's Sandy, and in today's video I will be filming my March wrap-up. So I'll be talking about all the books that I read in the month of March. Overall in March I only read 5 books, 3 of them were audiobooks, and I just had a decent reading month in terms of my enjoyment of the books that I read. The first book that I read is Forever Interrupted by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I'm slowly making my way through all of Taylor Jenkins Reid's books, and this is the third one that I've read. This is a story that follows Elsie, who has recently gotten married, and unfortunately only 9 days after they got married, Ben passes away in an accident, and at the hospital Elsie faces Susan, who is her mother-in-law, and she has actually never met the mother-in-law, and her mother-in-law didn't even know that she existed. Despite Ben and Susan having a very close relationship, Ben just never disclosed it to his mother that he was seeing someone and that they actually got married. So there's definitely a lot of tension between Elsie and the mother-in-law, and so this book is told in 2 different timelines. We see the past, which is seeing how Elsie and Ben met and seeing their relationship develop, and then we're in the present, which is after Ben has passed away. Elsie is dealing with the aftermath of Ben's passing, so we're definitely seeing her grieving a lot throughout the book. And unfortunately, I didn't like this book very much. I thought it was okay. I still enjoyed it. I went into this book not knowing anything about it, and so when I read that first chapter, the author definitely hits you with a very heart-wrenching scene at the very beginning, and I was just like, ooh. But as I was reading all of the past chapters, I just didn't really feel compelled by Elsie and Ben's relationship at all. I believe they met like New Year's Day or New Year's Eve, and literally 6 months later they have eloped. They do have a pretty fast relationship, but I just didn't feel any like connection between them. I didn't feel a spark between them. I just never felt compelled by their relationship. They definitely had some moments, but overall I just didn't really like Ben as a love interest. So because I didn't really like Ben, I didn't really care about reading those chapters, and I found them to be quite boring at times. I did really like seeing Elsie and her mother-in-law's relationship develop. I also really liked Elsie's best friend in this book. She was definitely very supportive, but other than the fact of her being supportive, I felt like her presence in the book was just to be there for Elsie, and I just wish we got a little more depth to her character, since she does have a pretty big role in the book, since she's always there helping Elsie out with whatever. So overall, I would give this book a 3 out of 5 stars. The next book that I finished in March is We Are the Ants by Shaun Hutchinson, and I actually listened to this book as an audiobook. I do want to give a trigger warning for suicide, grief, depression, severe bullying, physical assault, attempted rape, and also homophobia. So this story follows a gay teenager named Henry Denton, and he is periodically abducted by aliens. He has knowledge that the world is ending in about 144 days, and he is given the option to press this button in order to stop the world from ending. So the story explores whether Henry should press the button or not. This story definitely deals with a lot of important issues. There's this character in this book named Marcus, and I just hated his character so much. He was just so cruel. It was just hard to listen to it at times because of all the things that Henry was going through, especially with the severe bullying that he had to deal with. It was just so heartbreaking to read. Henry is also dealing with the fact that his boyfriend died by suicide. It was just so sad to read about everything that he's going through. It's a heavy book at times, but Henry also has this voice that can be funny and lighthearted, and I really appreciated those moments in the book. There is a bit of a romance in here, but that really isn't the focus of the story at all. The love interest is Latinx, and I believe he's pansexual. It's not explicitly stated that he's pansexual, but it's definitely implied. I really like seeing all the different relationships that Henry had in this book. I absolutely loved his relationship that he had with his science teacher, and seeing how much she truly cared about him, wanting to help him do better in school and just making sure that he's doing okay. I really disliked Henry's brother at first, but his character definitely warms up to you as the story goes on. Overall, I ended up rating this book a 3.5 out of 5 stars. I just didn't connect to the story enough to give it a higher rating, but I definitely think this is a very important read, and I would still definitely recommend it. I know so many people have really loved this book. The next book that I finished in March is Nice Try, Jane Sinner by Lianne Oelke, and this is a book that follows our main character Jane, who enters this student-run reality TV show. And while this is happening, she's taking classes at a community college. One of the main reasons I picked this book up is because I knew that Emma from Emma Books really enjoyed it. I haven't really seen many people talk about this book on BookTube, and so since I saw that it was available at the library, I decided to check it out and read it, and I flew through this book. I really like the writing style of this book. The story is told through a journal format, but with all the dialogue, it's formatted like a script. So this is kind of like an example of what it looks like, but I really enjoyed this. I really enjoyed the interactions of all the characters with one another. I think the story has been compared to Big Brother. I don't watch Big Brother. I don't really know what it's about, but there's this group of complete strangers living in a house together, competing in challenges and trying not to get eliminated. I feel like that's a really unique concept, and I really enjoyed reading how that played out in this book. I do want to give a trigger warning for discussions on suicide and depression. It's not the main focus of the story, but the presence of these topics are still there. Jane also struggles with her faith, and that's something that has been impacting her relationship with her parents. Just reading a book taking place in the college environment and seeing a main character taking college classes, it just makes me wish there were more books focusing on a main character in college. Fangirl is definitely one of my favorite books that takes place in a college setting, and I wish there was more. If you know of any, please let me know. I really enjoyed this book, and I really enjoyed all the humor in it. It was definitely very entertaining and lighthearted at times, but it also dealt with some more serious issues. So I would rate this book a 4 out of 5 stars. The next book that I read is Pieces of Her by Karin, and this is an adult thriller book, and I listened to this as an audiobook. This story is told in alternating timelines. We have the present following a main character, Andrea, who is going out to eat with her mother, and all of a sudden they are in this hostage situation and there is a shooting that occurs. During this situation, Andrea's mother, Laura, ends up killing the shooter, and Andrea sees a completely different side of her that she's never seen before. This incident was actually recorded, and there's this whole media frenzy which brings Laura a lot of unwanted attention. Laura is injured, so after she's released from the hospital, she's actually attacked, and so this causes Andrea to go on the run. I also want to give a trigger warning for this book for shooting, violence, death, domestic abuse, and also homophobia. So the first 4 hours of the audiobook or so, we're in Andrea's point of view. And then all of a sudden, the author switches to a completely different timeline following a completely different character, and I just didn't like it. Alternating timelines just felt very jarring and abrupt, and I just didn't like the way it flowed with the story, especially considering the fact that the first switch in the timelines happened 4 hours after I got invested in, you know, what was currently happening in the present. So every time the switch would occur, it just made me lose interest in the book. This audiobook is like 16 hours, so it's pretty long, and I honestly would have DNF'd it if I didn't have anything else to listen to during that week. The story was just very slow at times, and there's nothing wrong with the story being slow paced. This story just felt very dull to me. The dullness of it, along with the slow pace, just made me not enjoy it. And as for the characters, I never really liked any of them. I didn't care about any of the characters. I didn't care what happened to them. The main character, Andy, was just so irritating at times too. Andy is definitely thrown into a lot of stressful situations. Most people are familiar with our flight and fight response. There's also this other component called the freeze response, and Andy would just constantly freeze up at any given situation, and I understand that's a very valid response, but the fact that it kept happening over and over and over, I just got tired of it. She would freeze up and become utterly useless. Even if she's just talking to someone, she would stumble over her words, not know what to say, and just sit there with her mouth open, not uttering a word at all. There was like one part in the story where one of the other characters described Andy as like being a fish with her mouth open, and she said something else that I can't remember, but I just laughed when that character said that because it perfectly described Andy. And also, the story really didn't make sense to me for the most part, just because like Andy has been kept in the dark about her mother, and so she's going on this run not really knowing who she's running from or what she's running from, which made most of her chapters feel very pointless and that they lacked this sense of purpose. The story is definitely very different from the other Karin book that I read, which was Pretty Girls, and I did enjoy that one. So overall, wasn't a fan of this book. I ended up giving it a 2.5 out of 5 stars. Now that I'm thinking about it, I'm definitely leaning more towards a 2 out of 5 stars. And the very last book that I read in March is Odd One Out by Nic Stone. I actually also listened to this as an audiobook. So this story is told in 3 parts, each part following a different character. The audiobook also has a different narrator for all these characters. There really isn't a plot in this book, but the story explores friendships, relationships, sexual identity, self-discovery, and just simply being a teenager. I do want to mention that there is a bit of a love triangle in this book, so the story does get messy and complicated, but I think it's written in such an authentic way because the story isn't about the characters trying to pick who they want to be with and going back and forth about it. Instead, the characters are just trying to figure out their sexuality and coming to terms with all their feelings. The first character in this book that we follow is Courtney Cooper. He is a straight black male athlete. He plays basketball and he's on the varsity cheer squad. He is also in love with his best friend Jupiter, who he has known for years. However, Jupiter is a lesbian. The next character that we follow is Ray Evelyn Chin, and she is the new girl in town. She has become really close to both Jupiter and Courtney, and she begins to question her sexual identity. She's also half Irish and half Chinese. Lastly, we follow Jupiter Charity Sanchez. She is biracial. She is half black and half Latinx. She identifies as a lesbian, and she is the daughter to two dads. I really like that the story shows that sexual identity isn't just black and white. There's a whole spectrum to sexuality. One's sexuality isn't set in stone. It could change over the years, and that's okay. I really like the dynamic between all three of these main characters. I also really like some of the side characters, Britain and Golly. I really like that they added a lot of the comedic relief in the book. But while I like that the story draws attention to labels and questioning one's sexual identity, there are some scenes in this book that include biphobia, and those scenes are left unchallenged. There's also another scene in this book where one of the characters begs a side character who is a lesbian and who's also in college to have sex with this character. That just made me really uncomfortable because this character is underage and she was also tipsy at the time. So yeah, didn't like that at all. So overall, I would give this book a 3.5 out of 5 stars. So those are all the books that I read in the month of March. If you've read any of the books that I mentioned, please let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you next time. Bye!